Have you ever asked yourself, what would God say if he looked straight into your heart? A man thought he was doing everything right, faithful in church, giving his tithe, helping others. But after a tragic accident, he stood face to face with Jesus and discovered a truth that shook him to the core. This story isn't just about life after death. It's about the one thing many of us miss, until it's almost too late. It was a quiet Sunday morning in Tennessee, the kind of day that made the birds sing a little louder and the sunlight feel like a gentle blessing. I woke up early, brewed my usual cup of black coffee, and ironed the same light blue shirt I wore every week to church. Routine, comfort, faith. My name is Robert, and back then, I was what most people would call a faithful man. I never missed a Sunday service. I tithed 10%, no more, no less. I greeted people at the door with a firm handshake and a practiced smile. I believed, deep in my bones, that I was on the right path. After all, I was doing everything I'd been taught. Everything God expected, or so I thought. That morning, I took my usual seat, second pew from the front, right in the center. From there, I could hear every word the pastor said, as if he were speaking only to me. The sermon was about tithing again. He quoted Malachi 3:10 with fiery conviction. "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse." I nodded along, feeling the same weight of duty and guilt that sermon always stirred up in me. But there was also pride. A quiet voice inside me whispered, "You do this. You're one of the faithful ones." I had convinced myself that my obedience in giving was a key to blessing, a silent transaction between me and heaven. I didn't question it. I didn't feel it either. But I checked the boxes week after week. That's what mattered, right? After the final prayer, I lingered for a while, shook a few hands, said the usual, "Bless you, brother," and headed home. The sun was still shining as I got into my car, the radio playing a soft gospel tune I'd heard 1,000 times. Everything felt normal, familiar, safe. And then, everything shattered. The truck came out of nowhere. I didn't see the red light it had ignored, didn't hear the screeching tires or the crunch of metal. One moment I was at the intersection, one breath, one blink, and the next. Silence. Not the kind of silence you hear late at night or in a chapel. This was something else. A stillness so complete, so otherworldly, it pressed against my chest like a weightless fog. I tried to speak, but I had no voice. I looked around, but the world I knew was gone. No sky, no street, just light. Blinding, golden, endless light that didn't hurt my eyes. It soothed them. And then, I felt it. A presence. Not just near me, but within me. Like someone had opened every door inside my soul and stepped through them all at once. It was love, yes. But it was also truth. A love so pure it made me weep, and a truth so sharp it exposed every hidden corner of my heart. That's when I saw him. I didn't need an introduction. My knees buckled and I fell to the ground, trembling. Jesus stood before me, not as a painting, not as a story, but as a living force of holiness and mercy. His eyes, they didn't just look at me, they read me. Every thought, every motive, every mask I had ever worn. I wanted to speak, to explain, to justify, but I couldn't. He asked gently, "Do you know why you're here?" I couldn't answer. My throat was dry with fear and awe. My mind raced with confusion. Then he said something that shattered my soul. "Let me show you." And in an instant, my entire life unfolded before us like a film. Not just actions, but intentions. Not just moments, but motives. I saw the times I gave with a smile, but felt superior inside. The times I helped others, not from compassion, but for the applause. I saw myself walking past the needy, justifying it in the name of boundaries. I even saw my tithes, neatly calculated, proudly delivered, offered from obligation, not love. And then Jesus said, "You misunderstood. The tithe is not about money. It's about trust. It's about the heart." I broke. Tears I didn't know I had began to fall. I wanted to run, to hide, to undo all of it, but there was no hiding in that light. No excuses, no pretending. I had lived a life of spiritual bookkeeping and never truly surrendered. Jesus continued, "You received much, but you held back even more." I was speechless. And then, just as my heart began to shatter, he said, "Now, let me show you what you missed." Before you see what he saw next, don't forget to subscribe, comment your city, and say amen for a special prayer. What came next was unlike anything the human mind can truly grasp. As Jesus uttered the words, "Let me show you what you missed," I felt the ground, or whatever had been supporting me, melt away. Not in fear, but in surrender. I was being drawn, lifted, almost cradled by a force that was neither wind nor gravity. It was purpose. Pure, divine purpose. I moved, though I didn't walk. The light around me began to shift. It grew brighter, but not harsh. It pulsed gently, like the heartbeat of the universe itself. And with each pulse, I felt memories I had long forgotten returning. Not as thoughts, but as feelings. Moments when I had felt awe, silence, reverence. All of them were mere echoes of this place. Then the colors began. Not colors like we see on Earth. These were living hues, gold that shimmered like warm honey, blues so deep they sang, greens that seemed to breathe with every blink. The very air shimmered with a kind of music I couldn't hear with my ears, but felt vibrating in my chest. It wasn't a song. It was recognition. Like my soul was remembering a language it once knew before birth. I passed through what I can only describe as a veil of light. It was neither curtain nor doorway, but a threshold. The moment I crossed, everything changed. Ahead of me was a vast open expanse, like a field, and yet not earthly at all. The ground glowed softly beneath my feet, every blade of light dancing like a flame without heat. Above, the sky was not blue but radiant, like dawn captured in eternal stillness. There were no shadows, only presence. And then, I began to hear them. Voices. Not loud, not urgent, gentle, joyful, woven together in harmony. Not like a choir rehearsing, but more like a family laughing, loving. Each voice was distinct, yet all belonged to one great chorus of belonging. I didn't see faces yet, but I felt the people, souls, around me. Their joy was not because of me. It was simply who they were. A sense of home filled me, deeper than anything I'd ever known. Not a place I had visited, but a place that had always waited for me. I wept again, not in shame this time, but in longing. Longing for a life I had never dared to believe possible. And that's when I saw them. Figures walking slowly across the field, dressed in garments that shimmered with light, not fabric. Their faces were full of peace, yet bore stories. Each one looked into my eyes, not with surprise, but with recognition, as if they'd been waiting. One of them, I knew her. She had passed decades ago. My grandmother, her face younger, radiant, her eyes the same deep brown that had comforted me as a child. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her embrace was made of light, and I felt it enter me as if every lonely moment of my life had just been answered. And then, time stopped. I felt a shift, like a bell being struck in my spirit. Jesus was beside me again. I hadn't seen him approach. He was simply there, as natural as breath. He walked beside me, slowly, hands behind his back, as if strolling through a garden he had tended for eternity. "These are the ones who surrendered," he said, not perfectly, but sincerely. His voice didn't echo. It resonated. They gave their hearts to me, not just their rituals. His eyes searched mine again, not in judgment, but with a longing that pierced me. Then he lifted his hand, and what I saw next. Before I continue, take a moment. Has your soul ever longed for something deeper? Comment a spiritual moment you've lived. I'll pray for you. What I saw was what could have been. He showed me moments I had missed, not opportunities to gain, but chances to give. A stranger I had ignored at a gas station, a friend I never called back, a family member whose silent pain I had never asked about. They passed like whispers in the air, but each one carried the weight of eternity. "You focused on performance," he said, "but missed my presence." I wanted to argue, to explain. But how do you explain to love itself? Then he turned, and suddenly the light around us began to dim, not with anger, but with truth. "Now," he said, "I must show you the other side." And in a heartbeat, the colors faded. The warmth thinned. The sky above us cracked into a deep silence. We were no longer in the field. We were somewhere else entirely. I was not afraid, but I was no longer at ease. Everything in me sensed what was coming. And yet, I followed. Because now, I had to know. The moment we stepped into that new realm, the atmosphere changed. The silence was not peaceful. It was weighty, dense. It pressed against my chest like grief I couldn't name. The warmth I had felt just moments ago faded, replaced by an eerie stillness that seemed to watch me, study me, wait for me to understand. We stood in a space that had no walls, yet felt enclosed. The light here was not gone. It was veiled, like the last flicker of a candle before the wick surrenders. Shadows moved, but not with life. They drifted slowly, as if carrying the heaviness of what they once were. The air, if you could call it that, was thick with a sorrow I couldn't place. Not fear, not horror. Something deeper, like standing in a room filled with the echo of missed chances. Jesus walked ahead of me, silent. I followed. My steps made no sound, but every movement felt deliberate, like a lesson being written in the marrow of my bones. Then I saw them. Figures, more human than the radiant souls from before, but dimmed, hollow. Their faces were not twisted in terror, but in regret, a grief so profound it no longer cried out. It simply was. They sat, stood, walked in slow repetition, not punished, but paralyzed by their own unhealed choices. Some held tightly to what looked like treasures, but they were illusions, flickering shadows of things they had loved more than truth. Others clutched their chests, as if still trying to protect their pride. And some just stared, as if waiting for something that would never come. "This," Jesus said quietly, "is what it looks like to live far from me." I turned to him, my heart breaking. But they believed, didn't they? His eyes, filled with unbearable sadness, met mine. Belief without surrender is not trust, and trust is the doorway to love. He walked slowly past them, not with judgment, but with mourning. They knew about me. They quoted me, gave in my name. But their hearts, they kept for themselves. And then, I saw myself, not a mirror, a memory, a moment frozen in this place. I was sitting in my car, checking off a checklist in my mind. Tithe, check. Church, check. Smile, check. And in the stillness, I could hear my own thoughts. I've done my part. I'm safe. But I wasn't safe. I was distant. Distant from the surrender he longed for. Distant from the still, small voice that had whispered to me all along. I want your heart, not your performance. Jesus turned to me again. You were never far from me, he said. But your heart was never fully mine. The ground beneath us shifted. Not violently, just enough to signal a transition. The weight of that place settled deep into me. It wasn't hell, not the fire and brimstone I had feared as a child. It was worse. It was separation. It was silence where love should have spoken. It was knowing that the invitation had always been there, and never fully accepted. Then why show me this? I asked. His answer came not in words, but in presence. Because he loved me enough to break me. Because only through brokenness could I be made whole. He raised his hand again, and the darkness around us began to dissolve like fog. Slowly, color returned. The weight lifted. Warmth seeped into my bones again. And we were back, in that first realm of light, standing near the veil. But I was no longer the same. He looked at me, not with commands, but with invitation. I will not force your heart, he said, but I will give you a choice. My breath caught in my throat. I knew what was coming. I wasn't ready. But I had to be. You may return, he said, and live your life for me, not for rules, not for image, but for love. Or, you may stay as you are, safe, numb, comfortable, but never full. He stepped forward. And before you choose, I will show you what your life could become. And with that, the world around us cracked open once again. But this time, it wasn't the past. It was the future. What unfolded next was not a memory, nor a warning. It was a glimpse, a vision more real than anything I had ever lived. Jesus stood beside me as the veil of time lifted, revealing a tapestry of what could be. Not guaranteed, not forced. A possibility, if I chose to walk the path he had laid before me. I saw myself different. Not because my clothes had changed or my routines, but because something deeper had shifted. I was walking slower, listening more, smiling without fear, speaking truth without rehearsing it. My hands reached out, not from obligation, but from a well of compassion that pulsed through every word and gesture. I saw people I didn't recognize, men and women, young and old, gathered in a quiet room. I stood among them, speaking, not with authority, but with testimony, sharing my story, telling them what I had seen. And their eyes, they weren't fixed on me. They were soft, wet with tears, not of sorrow, but of awakening. I saw a man in the back row fall to his knees, whispering something I couldn't hear. A woman embracing a child she hadn't held in years. Broken relationships mended, hardened hearts softened. Not because I was persuasive, but because I had been transformed. And then, it faded. Jesus turned to me. His face held no pressure. Only hope. Now, he said gently. Choose. I fell to my knees, not out of fear, but surrender. Lord, I whispered, I don't want to live for myself anymore. I choose you. His smile was soft but radiant. A joy that could shatter galaxies lived in that gaze. He reached down and touched my shoulder, and in that instant, every weight I had ever carried fell from me like ash in the wind. Go, he said. Tell them, not just what you saw, but what I want most of all, their hearts. A wind began to rise around us, not violent, but commanding. The light grew brighter. My body felt as though it were being pulled upward and downward all at once. I closed my eyes. And when I opened them, I was back. Pain shot through every inch of my body. Machines beeped. Nurses shouted. The fluorescent lights of the hospital ceiling blinked into view. I was alive. The doctors called it a miracle. I agreed. But not for the reason they thought. The real miracle hadn't happened in my bones or blood. It had happened in my soul. Days passed, then weeks. I tried to describe what I had seen, but words felt too small. How do you explain a color that doesn't exist? A sound you feel in your soul? A love that sees everything and still chooses you? So I started simply. I told the truth. That I had met Jesus. That I had thought I was faithful. But my heart had been locked in a transaction. That he didn't want my money, my checklist, or my pride. He wanted me. Completely. It wasn't easy. People looked at me with polite smiles, the kind that hide discomfort. Some dismissed it as a dream. Others said nothing at all. But a few leaned in. Their eyes held questions too heavy to ask, and in those moments, I saw the same longing I had felt in that other world. So I kept going. I told my story to anyone who would listen, sometimes in churches, sometimes in living rooms, sometimes to a stranger in a coffee shop. Not to convert them, but to invite them, to remind them that the kingdom of God is not a ritual, it's a relationship. And slowly, things changed. I gave differently, not by percentage, but by presence. I gave time. I gave attention. I gave without needing recognition. I gave because I was finally free to give, not to earn, but to love. Years have passed since that day. I'm older now, slower in body, quicker in spirit. And every morning I wake up and whisper the same words. Take my heart again, Lord. It's yours. I don't live in fear anymore. I live in invitation, because once you've seen the eyes of Jesus, you never want to live another day without reflecting his gaze. And if this story has reached you, it's not by accident. Maybe, just maybe, this is your moment too. If you've read this far, say amen in the comments and tell me where you're watching from, so I can pray for your journey too.